All right, guys, time for a niche deep dive. We're going to be talking about fencing on this video. Yesterday or the day before, I had a conversation with my little brother, and he was asking me, he's like, hey, man, I've been doing a lot of concrete. I know there's still deals out there, but obviously, you know, it's getting harder and harder to find those cities. The niche is great, but the cities are getting tougher to find. He's like, as I'm scaling, what are some other niches that are good? And I told him, I'm like, look, here's the deal is, again, as I've said, go into tried and true niches. And so I kind of went through a couple and I said, hey, have you tried fencing? Have you tried fencing? And he's like, no, I have not tried it. So I want to talk about fencing today. Immediately after we talked about that, I'm like, let me make a video about this, okay? Now, I got to be upfront with you guys. I have not, and I always want to be candid, and I always want to just say this up front. I have personally, for whatever reason, it's not because I just didn't think it wouldn't work. It's because I just never did it. And I don't know why, and I really, really want to, but I'm going to give you my thoughts on fencing. I believe fencing is a phenomenal niche, and I know that I believe that because I know multiple people that are making phenomenal money in this niche, and I actually know people. I think three people personally that have gone into this niche. It's done very, very well, and they've actually decided to create their own fencing company and just take their own leads for themselves. I know a couple of people, 3 people on the top of my head that are doing this. I'm sure there's more. So fencing, I think fencing fits the bill. I think it's something everybody should be looking at, including my little brother and anyone that's close to me, anyone in my groups. I think it's a great niche because of the following, okay? Number one, it is not brand driven, right? When you're getting a fence, whether it's a block wall, whether it's a vinyl fence, whether it's a picket fence, whether it's a wooden fence, a fence is a fence is a fence, and wood is wood is wood, and whatever the material is it's like, there's not that much difference, right? It's not like you're going to get that much better of a product, that much better of a service, or that much better of a fence from one company to the next. Now, if you have a shady company, of course, you may risk having a really, crappy product. But if the company's decent and you're comparing Jack's fencing with Steve's fencing or Jill's fencing, it's just like concrete, man. Concrete's concrete. And yeah, maybe one has, they do a little bit better job smoothing it out. Or maybe one, they really straighten out those fence posts, whatever. But a fence is a fence, and you can't really have that much difference, right? Now, we're not talking about custom gates and custom fences and all this stuff where there's a huge difference. We're literally talking about throwing up a fence, guys, putting up a fence. As long as they're licensed, as long as it's not that much of a difference. So number one, it's not brand driven. Number two, you need a fence, man. Now, I can tell you from firsthand experience, some parts of the country and some builders, they don't include the cost of a fence in the price of the build, in the price of the lot, in the price of the home. But that's a good thing for us because what happens, and that's what I see, I actually have a fencing website. It's not fencing in general. It's a specific website. It's block wall fencing, okay? Block walls. And as I look at the people that are coming in, because I used to take these calls, and we've had this website for years and years and years, and I would talk to them, and it's funny because I would listen to these calls, and 99% of the time it was people that had moved into the house, and they didn't want to wrap it into the mortgage, or they couldn't afford it or whatever, and now they've saved up a little money, got a tax return, and now they're going to build their fence. And so you get a lot of those homeowners that are looking to do it themselves, which is a great thing, because if it was the contractors that we're putting in the fences, the contractors have their guys. They go and they bid it out, and they do like, okay, I'm going to have you do all of my fences. And so that's what I love about this niche is you're always going to see a lot of volume because a lot of times builders don't include that in the price, okay? So number one, it's not brand driven, which means that you are going to, when you go to get a fence, you are literally going to call a company and say, hey, come give me a quote. That's it. You're not going to go into a fencing store. You're not doing this. You're not going to a showroom. You are literally having somebody come and measure and give you a price. Done. Okay. So number one, I love it for that. Number two, it's high ticket, relatively high ticket. It's going to cost some money for somebody to put in a fence. And I know that because I put in multiple fences now in different houses. And I know what this costs just to these stupid cinder blocks that are so ugly, just such an eyesore. And you can't really mess them up, and it's expensive, man. It costs a lot of money to do, and so the ticket is a good size ticket. There's pretty decent margins in it, and I really like it for that. Okay, so number one, it's not brand driven. Number two, it's a phone driven business, which I kind of mentioned already. It's high-ish ticket, okay, which is another thing that is a requirement. And for me, if it's not high-ish ticket, it's got to be super high margins, which fencing is not. There's always gonna be that cost of material. It's not duct cleaning where you're just your labor. You do have the cost of material. So because it's high ticket, and even if it's not as good of margins as a duct cleaning, it still works because it is high ticket. So brand driven, phone driven, high ticket. And guys, I would also toss this out there. It's one of those things where let's just talk about like how this has to do with the recession, and as people's, dispensable income goes down, whatever. I do believe it's going to be affected to some degree, because I believe every niche will be affected by a recession or by this or that or the rest. But I also know that people value privacy, and to some degree, your hand is kind of forced. You kind of have to put in a fence. So for example, I had a house, the house before this we built this thing, I was like 23 years old, 24, whatever it was. And we're like, let's get into this. We were super worried about the total cost of the house. And so we did everything basic. And they're like, do you want to put the cost of the fence in with the loan? We're like, no. We didn't do any of the upgrades because we wanted to keep that price really low, keep our mortgage really low, because we were just terrified, right? And this is when I was 10 years ago. And we never put in a fence, and it sucked, man. Like, our kids, we were always worried about them running the street. But what happened is when we went to sell that house, this was a big deal. This is a sticking point. This is something that was like a deal breaker for multiple people, because when people were going to look at the house, they looked at it and went, man, and as soon as we move in, we're going to have to put in a fence. It's going to cost us $10,000. And who wants to spend $10,000 on a stupid fence? Nobody, right? And so what ended up happening is, in order for that property to have the value that it needed to have, a fence needed to be installed. So for those reasons, guys, I'm a big fan of this niche. On top of that, I've seen it work. I've talked to people that have made it work. I know people that are doing this and doing a lot of these websites. And so I do know it's been hit. It's, tree service has been hit, concrete's been hit, some of these niches we've been talking about. But I don't think, because we haven't talked about it as much online, it hasn't been something that's constantly been used as an example. I don't think it's going to be hit as hard as a concrete, for example. So I think for you guys that are sitting there going, man, what should I do? I want to use a tried and true niche, but should I be doing concrete? Oh, there's my, sorry, my thing was going black here. And I clicked the space bar and I was watching the video of my dad. You guys need to go check that out, by the way. Anyway, guys, these are my thoughts on fencing. I say it's a go. But I have not personally done it. I have had students do it. I've had colleagues do it. Fencing, this is a niche deep dive. Go and check it out if you're looking for an alternative to concrete, but you want something that's tried and true and you want to start to scale. Fencing has my stamp of approval.